I'm originally from International Falls, or a little town near International Falls called Rainier, Minnesota. It's up on the Canadian border, and it's one of the coldest spots in the nation. Now I live in Indianapolis, south of Indianapolis, with my family. I answered a blind ad in a newspaper in Anchorage, Alaska. I was working up there for Revolution Airlines, and there was a blind ad in the newspaper about aircraft mechanics wanted, Southeast Asia. And I answered that ad. I had no idea who it was or whatever. And about 6 months later, I get accepted, and they sent me an airline ticket and told me to get my passport. And the gentleman I talked to said, "We won't call you in for an interview, but being you're already halfway around the world," so they sent me off got on the airplane, went to Bangkok and then into Laos. It was quite a cultural shock, as any place foreign would be, at a young age, and it took me a while to get used to the food and the climate. Mainly the climate coming from Alaska was kind of difficult, but once I got up into Laos and into the mountaintops of northern Laos, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much for the work environment. We had many issues with aircraft that needed to be taken care of, and sometimes it would be very difficult to try to get recovery of aircraft that had crashed and clean up the remains of what was left of the aircraft, and those things get very emotional to do that, especially when somebody gets killed in them. We've done that several times, and it gets stressful if you get caught in a situation when there's fighting going on with the Pathet Lao, and it can be a little bit challenging to deal with that, but overall it was probably the best experience of my life. First was sent to Udorn, and then they transferred a group of aircraft from Udorn to Vientiane, and they transferred me to Vientiane with it. And at that time, I was about the only single guy there. So when the Air Force needed help at Long Tieng, they had Air Force mechanics that were taking care of the small O-1 spotter aircraft, and they were crashing and running out of gas, and they couldn't talk on the radios, and so they hired Air America to go and take care of that problem. So my main role was to take care of and maintain the aircraft of the Air Force O-1 program, but it also included all the Air America aircraft that would come into Long Tieng. And I had a team of mechanics, Filipino mechanics, who were very good mechanics, and we had, quite a crew, and it was good, fun. Long Tieng was a unique place. I just went on Google Earth the other day to look at it to see what it looked like today, and it was a big village, and there were landing and takeoffs busier than JFK Airport with Air America aircraft in and out, and Lao Air Force T-28s. But the climate was nice and cool, being high, very dusty. There were only a few Americans there, probably 10 at the most, 12, somewhere in that neighborhood, and I was the only Air America person that was stationed there. We would get, some pilots would come in there and stay in the Air America hostel and, overnight and stuff like that. We had entertainment. We had a bear cage with 4 honey bears or Himalayan black bears. They've got the yellow V on their bellies. And above the bear cage, we had a little place to have a drink and play darts. The Hmong people were mainly in and out of the aircraft, sometimes alive and sometimes not. And that's very sad to see. Air America hauled many families around, in and out of there, and supplied them with their food and stuff. And interaction with them personally, I had 2 Hmong people that worked for me, and they helped clean the aircraft and help refueling and stuff like that, that were paid for by, well, one of them was paid for by me, the other one was paid for by Air America. But they were very good workers once they were taught how to, do certain things. Other than that, we had no reaction in the village and stuff like that. There's nothing else to do there, but it's very, very interesting. Well, you see the sadness of the end of the program in Laos, and you see the Hmong people, how they suffered, and it was just so sad to see. And since then, I've been to other countries all over the world, and you kind of see some of the same suffering of other human beings. It's not very enlightening. I spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia and Libya, Nigeria, and Africa is pretty sad also, and yeah, it's just sad to see it, But I also learned more about airplanes in those years that I was there than any other time, which is both a plus and a minus. And I say that because some of my fixes, so to speak, on aircraft, you would never do in the real world today. So yeah, whatever it took. There was a Hmong gentleman that I worked with in Long Tieng, and all I knew him by the name of Snoopy. And I was at a reunion a few years ago, and Ed Bustamante, who was air operations in Long Tieng, I asked Ed, I said, I wonder what ever happened to Snoopy? And he said, oh, he's in Hugo, Minnesota. So I called him up, and I said, hey, Snoopy. I never knew his real name, I said, hey, Snoopy. And we chatted a bit and everything, and he told me, I said, I have your hat. I'm going to give it back to you. So I was going to stop in there and give him his hat back. And we traded hats over, and I gave him an Australian bush hat that I had. And he died about a year later. So now I got a hold of his daughters, and I'm going to give them his hat at the dinner tomorrow night. They're going to come for dinner. But his whole family is here, his brothers and so I met his cousin at the market yesterday. He said, I had pictures I showed him of, oh, that's my cousin.